My favorite things about my husband is that my beautiful husband is that we just we share a sense of humor. We both believe that laughter and humor is the sixth sense and life is incomplete without it.
January 2008. A film festival in Palm Springs. Anne Hathaway meets a stranger and turns to a friend right after with 4 words. I am going to marry him. That is the whole encounter. Except she is not single. She has been with someone else for 4 years, someone the entire world assumes she will eventually marry instead. He has no idea his entire world is about to collapse in a matter of months. The stranger has no idea either. 2 years pass before either of them says a word about it out loud. To understand how a throwaway line at a film festival turned into an actual marriage, you have to start with the man Anne was dating at the time and exactly how badly and how publicly that relationship was about to end. 2 words that predicted a marriage. Here is the detail most retellings of this story leave out entirely. When Anne Hathaway met Adam Schulman in January of 2008, nothing about the moment looked romantic from the outside. Introduced through mutual friends. Small talk. That was basically it. Except Anne walked away from that conversation completely certain of something neither of them acted on for months. She told a friend, almost as a joke, that she was going to marry him. Then she went right back to her actual relationship with an Italian businessman named Raffaello Folieri, someone she had been dating since 2004. On paper, none of it makes sense. She barely knew Adam. She was committed to someone else. She said it anyway. The kind of offhand comment that only means something in hindsight. The sort of thing you only bring up years later once it actually comes true. Within 6 months, the relationship she was actually in would completely fall apart. Not because of Adam, because of a version of her boyfriend that Anne herself did not fully understand yet. One that was about to become international news. The 4-year relationship that unraveled overnight. Raffaello Folieri presented himself as a well-connected Italian real estate developer. Close ties to the Vatican, he claimed. Access to Catholic church properties at steep discounts, he told investors, because of those connections. He reportedly went as far as claiming to be the Vatican's own chief financial officer to some of the people he was courting for money. Once that claim unraveled, it made international headlines almost overnight, turning what had looked like a glamorous relationship into a genuine public scandal. Prosecutors said he used those claims to improperly access millions of dollars from investors, money that reportedly funded private jets, and a Fifth Avenue apartment costing tens of thousands of dollars a month. All of it built on connections that turned out to be almost entirely fabricated. In June of 2008, Anne ended the relationship. Days later, federal agents arrested Folieri on charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. According to Folieri himself, their final phone call happened at 2 in the morning, Anne telling him she loved him forever before they hung up. 4 hours later, he was in custody. He would eventually plead guilty to 14 counts and get sentenced to more than 4 years in prison, closing out a scandal that had, only months earlier, looked from the outside like an enviable relationship between a rising star and a wealthy international businessman. Anne had to fly to Mexico for a press tour almost immediately after the news broke, smiling through interviews while her personal life collapsed in headlines back home. She later joked about the timing on Saturday Night Live, telling the audience she had broken up with her boyfriend, and 2 weeks later, he was sent to prison for fraud, asking the crowd if anyone else had been through something similar. Genuine laugh. But it papered over how raw the situation actually still felt for her privately. Because here is what she has said, away from the cameras. Real trust issues. The kind that make you replay every conversation looking for signs you missed. Wondering how you shared 4 years of your life with someone you apparently never really knew at all. That wound, more than the arrest itself, is the thing Adam eventually had to work around when he finally got his chance. Except his chance was nowhere near as close as it should have been. And the reason why is almost funny in hindsight. The friend zone standoff nobody expected to last 2 years. Here is where the story gets more complicated than the highlight reel usually suggests. Anne and Adam did not start dating right after the Folieri scandal broke, even though the timing would have made for a cleaner story. Instead, both of them made the exact same mistake independently without either one knowing it. Anne assumed Adam already had a girlfriend. Adam assumed Anne already had a boyfriend. So neither of them pursued anything. Both kept their distance, treating each other as strictly off-limits for months, without ever bothering to confirm whether that assumption was even true. Anne has since described it almost exactly like that, saying they hit it off immediately, but each thought the other was taken. So both of them decided to keep their distance rather than risk being the person who tried something with someone already spoken for. An assumption that, in hindsight, cost them the better part of a year they could have spent together instead. It took until around October of that same year, months after the Folieri arrest, before things actually started moving, roughly around the time Anne hosted Saturday Night Live for the first time, an event she has since pointed to directly as the moment things between her and Adam started to shift. Even then, nothing happened quickly. First photographed together, April 2009. More than a year after that first meeting in Palm Springs. For months after that, spotted separately at fashion shows and premieres, sitting front row at the same events without ever confirming they were together at all. Feeding a slow drip of paparazzi photos that never quite added up to an official announcement. An entire year passed before the world got any real confirmation, which meant that ridiculous offhand marriage prediction sat quietly unconfirmed for far longer than anyone watching from the outside could have known, buried under two people who were each too cautious to make the first real move, both convinced they had already missed their shot with the other. So what finally changed? Not a grand gesture. Something much smaller than that, and much slower to arrive than either of them would have liked. Falling for someone at the worst possible time. When Anne finally opened up about how the relationship actually started, she described it less like a fairy tale and more like something she had to talk herself into trusting. She has said she knew almost instantly that Adam was the love of her life. Then, in the same breath, a very different admission. She also knew she had met him at the worst possible time. After everything with Folieri, trusting anyone again felt reckless. She has described putting her trust in Adam as taking it out for what she called a ridiculous joyride, fully aware it could go badly all over again. It did not. If anything, the opposite happened. She has said falling for Adam actually made her more trusting of people in general, not less, which is not exactly what you would expect after a breakup that ended with federal agents at someone's door and her diaries getting pulled into a federal investigation. Their first real public appearance as a couple. December 2009. The premiere of a Broadway production of A Streetcar Named Desire, more than a year and a half after they first met at that film festival. From that point forward, the pattern that had defined their entire early relationship, careful, private, deliberately unhurried, became the exact template for how they would handle every major milestone that came after. Starting with the one that would make things permanent. And it did not come the way you would expect from either of them, given how long it had already taken them to get this far. A ring built by the man wearing the loss. 2 years after going public, Adam did something almost nobody expected from an actor turned occasional jewelry hobbyist. He designed Anne's engagement ring himself. Before any of this, Adam had actually built a modest acting career of his own. Brown University, a theater degree, a handful of episodes on the NBC series American Dreams, a small role in a Dukes of Hazzard television movie. Even a blink and you miss it appearance on The West Wing, playing a character credited simply as a young voter. None of it came close to Anne's level of fame. Adam never seemed particularly bothered by that gap, a detail that says a fair amount about how he handled being married to one of the most recognizable actresses on the planet without ever visibly competing for the spotlight. His path shifted instead towards something more hands-on. The idea for a ring traced back to a chance connection made years earlier when Adam met a jewelry designer named Heidi Nasser Fink on the set of Anne's film Alice in Wonderland. Heidi noticed something in him, a genuine eye for design, and the two of them eventually built an entire company together called James Banks Design, named after Adam's maternal grandfather, who had once designed jewelry of his own for Adam's grandmother, a small family tradition Adam ended up reviving almost by accident. Their earliest pieces together included pendants shaped like light bulbs, an idea Anne herself apparently helped inspire, once telling Adam that being away from home on set made her feel like she had lost her light, which the two designers eventually turned into an actual product line, one that continues selling today, years after that original conversation between the two of them. For the proposal, Adam worked with a diamond company to build an emerald-cut ring specifically suited to what he knew Anne would love, a detail later confirmed by the jewelry company's own owner, who said Adam had an unusually clear vision going in, right down to the exact cut and setting. Anne said yes. What started as an unrelated hobby, sparked by a random film set introduction years earlier, had somehow become the reason Adam was able to hand-deliver something he built himself at the single most important moment of their relationship. Instead of picking something off a shelf, like almost anyone else in his position would have done. A detail that quietly says more about this relationship than any public statement either of them ever gave. And the wedding that followed was no different, built on the exact same instinct. A wedding weekend built around the people who actually mattered. September 2012. Big Sur, California. Anne and Adam get married, a traditional Jewish ceremony at sunset. Roughly 180 guests. Here is what stood out. Not the size of the guest list, who was actually on it. Despite Anne's level of fame at the time, the wedding was noticeably light on major Hollywood names. The couple chose instead to keep the event built around close friends and family rather than industry connections. Anne wore a custom-designed gown, finished with a vintage-inspired headpiece and a simple veil. The kind of understated choice that fit exactly how the two of them had handled their entire relationship up to that point, favoring quiet elegance over anything designed to make headlines. They stretched the celebration across an entire weekend rather than a single day, treating it less like a red carpet event and more like an actual family gathering that happened to include a wedding. A strange contrast for two people who had spent years being extremely careful about what they revealed publicly, choosing, on the one day most celebrities turn into a media spectacle, to make it the most private moment of their entire relationship instead, protected from the same tabloid machine that had once torn through Anne's previous relationship in a matter of hours. 2 years later, they pushed that same instinct even further, co-producing a film together called Song 1, released in 2014, despite plenty of people warning Anne that working with your own spouse rarely ends well professionally, since mixing a marriage with a shared paycheck tends to expose cracks that dating alone never would. She has since said the opposite was true. Working alongside Adam taught her things about filmmaking she would not have picked up otherwise, and he turned out to be a genuinely skilled producer in his own right, not just someone riding along on her career. She has even said she learned a great deal from watching how he approached the process, treating him as a real creative partner rather than a supportive spouse standing quietly on the sidelines of her career. That same instinct toward privacy and toward doing things together rather than separately would carry directly into the next chapter of their story, the one involving two sons the world would only ever see in carefully controlled glimpses, and, much later, a surprise neither of them saw coming at this point in the story. Baby number 3 and the buzzer beater. Anne and Adam welcomed their first son, Jonathan, in March of 2016. Their second son, Jack, followed in the fall of 2019. Neither pregnancy came easily, Anne has said, describing the path to both as anything but straightforward and sending support to other people dealing with fertility struggles of their own. Somewhere along the way, the two of them also got matching tattoos, a small gesture representing the idea that each of them is already whole on their own, that being together simply makes both of them better, rather than either one completing the other. A small detail. But it tells you a lot about how deliberately the two of them have approached this relationship from the very beginning. Never as two halves finding completion, but as two whole people choosing each other again and again on purpose, every single time. Anne has described Adam in interviews as someone who supports her completely, someone who handles the logistics of their shared life so thoroughly that she has called him the most extraordinary person she has ever met, and said flatly that she considers herself lucky to have him as the partner she gets to spend her life with. She has also credited Adam directly for helping her get through some of the harder professional stretches of her career, including one particularly emotionally demanding film role that stayed with her long after filming wrapped each day. A psychological thriller that required her to sit in a genuinely difficult headspace for weeks at a time. He helped her draw the line between her real life and whatever character she was playing, something she has openly admitted she could not always manage on her own. In October of 2025, the two of them made a rare joint red carpet appearance at a charity event, honoring Anne's philanthropic work, still visibly affectionate after 13 years of marriage, at an event where she spoke about what it actually takes to live in a demanding city and build a life worth showing up for, telling the room that doing so takes real heart and plenty of it. It was a small, low-key moment, easy to miss in a sea of bigger celebrity news that week, but it fit the same pattern this entire relationship has followed from the very beginning: quiet, deliberate, and never performed for anyone but themselves. Then, in June of 2026, at 43 years old, Anne announced she was expecting a third child, sharing the news through a video of herself walking through her home before turning to reveal a growing bump. A few weeks later, on a late-night talk show, she admitted the pregnancy genuinely caught her off guard, joking that she and Adam knew what they were doing but were still shocked it actually worked at her age, calling the pregnancy their own version of a buzzer beater. It is a strange, funny way to describe the ending of a story that started with an offhand marriage prediction about a total stranger at a film festival almost 2 decades earlier. Somehow, the joke lands anyway, because everything else about this relationship, the ring he built himself, the wedding without the industry crowd, the two boys raised almost entirely out of public view, had already proven that prediction right long before this last surprise ever showed up. What began as a woman recovering from a very public, very humiliating heartbreak has quietly turned into one of the most stable, least dramatic marriages in Hollywood, precisely because neither of them ever treated it like something the public was entitled to see in full. Even now, with a third child on the way and 2 decades of history already behind them. They built a jewelry brand together instead of chasing tabloid attention. They produced a film together instead of avoiding professional risk. They chose a wedding weekend built around family instead of industry photographers. And 2 decades later, they are still adding new chapters to a story that technically started with 2 strangers assuming the worst about each other's relationship status at a film festival in the California desert, neither one of them brave enough at the time to simply ask the other directly. Knowing how long it actually took them to get together, both of them convinced for months that the other was already taken. Do you think Anne knew right away that Adam was the one? Or did it only become obvious looking back? Share what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this unveil, smash that like button, comment, and subscribe for more untold Hollywood tales, and hit the bell so you never miss a drop. Want more? Check out another one of our videos. Thanks for watching.